After a pretty average season that saw Virginia Tech go 6-7 with some aspirations that they might compete for an ACC title, Virginia Tech is returning their starting quarterback in Kyron Drones, who is a very good dual threat quarterback. Passing wise, needs to maybe take a step up, but was their second leading rusher, very athletic quarterback. Is he going to be able to produce with all of their top four receivers going to the NFL draft and with a pretty difficult schedule ahead of them? It's going to be tough to say what this Hokies team is going to be able to do next season, but we did see what they were able to accomplish or almost accomplish against some of the best teams like Miami last season. It's going to be an interesting one for Hokie fans. Taking a look at their schedule as a whole, their non-conference is not doing them any favors, starting it off against South Carolina in a neutral site game in Atlanta, and then at home against Vandy. It's not going to be an easy one. Then they have road games against Georgia Tech and Florida State, along with hosting Cal, Louisville, and Miami. This is a tough ACC schedule. They do get the benefit of not having to play Clemson or SMU, who were the top two teams last season. But despite having the seven home games, it's still going to be a really tough schedule for this Hokies team. Schedule difficulty of 6 out of 10.
Starting off the season in Atlanta with a game against South Carolina. The Gamecocks just barely missed out on the playoffs last season, going 9-3, bringing back Lenoris Sellers for another season after a very, very solid year in 2024. Not much hope for Virginia Tech in this one. We got the Gamecocks with an 85% chance to win this neutral site game. Next up is Vanderbilt, who had a pretty solid season by Vanderbilt standards last year. Obviously, the biggest game was the upset over Alabama. And I think they're going to be pretty solid again this year. Got a decent chance to make a bowl game once again. And just overall, I think they're a little bit better than Virginia Tech. So only a 40% chance for the Hokies to win this one, even though it's at home. Two pretty easy games after that with Old Dominion and Wofford. Yes, Old Dominion has beaten Virginia Tech in the past. Probably not going to happen again. We got a 100% chance for the Hokies to win both of these games. Then it's on to ACC play with a game at NC State to start off the year. The Wolfpack, one of the most disappointing teams in the conference last season. A lot of people thought they had a chance to win it all, as in win the ACC championship. But they did not, in fact, do that. Going only 6-6, I believe they won their bowl game after that. So it was either 6-7 or 7-6.
They went 6-6 during the regular season, then lost their bowl game.
All right, so they went 6-7. Just really not what people were expecting from NC State. So we do think that Virginia Tech has a solid chance to win this game. Going to go with 75% on the road here. Next up is Wake Forest at home. This one's an 80% chance. Wake Forest was probably the worst team in the conference last year. So just really don't expect them to compete in this one on the road. And then finally, before their first bye week, to conclude this 7-week stretch of games, going on the road to face Georgia Tech, who we are actually very high on this season. Haynes King back for another year. I know they only went 7-6 last season, but I do think Georgia Tech is going to be a very, very solid team in 2025. So this one, only a 35% chance for a Hokies win.
Coming out of that first bye week, they have two games before their next bye week, those being against Cal and Louisville. The Cal game is going to be an interesting one. We are very high on that Cal team because they're bringing in Devin Brown from Ohio State to compete for that starting quarterback job. Forget who the other quarterback they have there as well, also because he has a super long and complicated last name that I butcher every time I try to say it. But even though we're very high on them and they have Jaden Ott returning as well, that's a long road trip for Cal to come to Virginia Tech. So even though we think Cal is the better team, because Virginia Tech has the home field advantage, it's going to play a key factor in this game, in our opinion. So we're going to favor the Hokies in this one, giving them a 65% chance to get the job done here. Then they face Louisville the following week. Louisville is bringing in Miller Moss to be their starting quarterback next season after let's call it a mediocre season at USC. Had some turnover issues and then ended up getting benched for Jaden Mayava for the last 4 games of the season, including their bowl game. So I, I still think Miller Moss has a lot of upside, and by no means do I think it's going to hurt Louisville's chances at being a very solid team next year. But it's just going to be an adjustment for Miller Moss getting into the Louisville system. And this Virginia Tech team we saw could compete with the top teams in the ACC last season, including that game that they arguably should have won against Miami, but due to a controversial call, they ended up losing. So this is going to be an interesting one with it being at home. Enter Sandman's one of the greatest traditions in college football. So it's going to be a 45% chance for the Hokies in this one, but these two games are going to could be a turning point for this Hokies team as they go down the stretch of the season. After that second bye week, they will go on the road to face Florida State. Florida State coming off of a 2-10 season after being undefeated, winning the ACC championship and missing the playoffs 2 years ago. Now they're bringing in Thomas Castellanos from Boston College to be their quarterback. No more DJU. Thankful for all the Florida State fans, I'm sure. So this is going to be an interesting team next year. I know they've recruited a couple key guys, especially some wide receivers that have a lot of upside. Maybe they're a year out from truly returning to form that we saw with Jordan Travis leading that team, but I do think they're going to take a massive step forward. I don't think they're going to finish last place in the conference again. I could see them finishing in the middle of the pack, maybe giving some of the top teams a run for their money. So with it being on the road, I think this Virginia Tech team is going to have a tough environment to play in. But just because we don't really know what this Florida State team is going to look like, it's going to be almost a 50-50 split, giving the Hokies a 45% chance here just because it is a road game. Then the following week, they will face Miami at home. Miami's big story is that they bring in Carson Beck at quarterback from Georgia after probably his worst season at Georgia. Had a lot of turnover issues, but still led Georgia to a very successful season. They ended up being the number 2 team in the country, making the college football playoffs. Ultimately, they did end up losing to Notre Dame, who went on to go to the college football championship game. Granted, that was also with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, and Joe and I both had discussions during our playoff videos that maybe it wasn't such a bad thing that Carson Beck wasn't playing. But either way, I think Carson Beck is looking to sort of revitalize his career in probably his last year in college football. And I think Miami, as we saw with Cam Ward last year, has a very good offense. It's just going to depend on can they make any improvements on the defensive end. And despite all that, I still don't really believe in Carson Beck to be the Heisman candidate that a lot of people are saying that he can be. So compared to a lot of people, Joe and I are pretty low on this Miami team. We're not saying they're going to finish 500, but given their schedule, because I believe they have Notre Dame on their schedule as well, along with a tough ACC schedule, it, this is going to be a tough season for Miami. And I think Virginia Tech, as we saw last season when it was at Miami, Virginia Tech was still almost able to beat them, should have beat them. And now it's going to be at Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech is going to be mad based off of what happened last season. Virginia Tech's going to be out for blood. We're going to favor Miami just a little bit in this one because it's still Miami. Carson Beck still has that experience and they recruit so well. But a 45% chance for the Hokies in this one is a very good opportunity for them to get a signature win on the season. Finally, they have the in-state rivalry game against Virginia at Virginia. Virginia finished towards the bottom of the standings last year. We went 3-5 in the ACC, 5-7 overall. Not really a whole lot to say about Virginia. I don't know a whole lot. I know they've kind of fallen off over the past couple of years, and I think Virginia Tech just going to have a couple more athletic guys, more skilled position players that are going to get the job done for them in this one. So 60% chance for Virginia Tech to get the rivalry win on the road, but just because it is a rivalry game, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, just looking at the schedule, it's a pretty even split. You got 6 games where the Hokies are favored, 6 games where they're going to be underdogs. And I think that's probably where we're going to see Virginia Tech end up at exactly 6-6. Um, I'm not saying it'll be exactly those 6 games where they're favored that they're going to win. I'm sure there'll be a couple games they're not supposed to win that they do win, a couple they're not supposed to lose, they do lose. But in the end, I think it'll all sort itself out, and we'll see a 500 Hokies team this season.
Yeah, I think 500 is where we'll see them again. Um, like you were saying, I think they have potential to upset some of the better teams on the schedule. Vandy early on in the season, especially with being at home, maybe that's an early win that they can get, especially coming off that South Carolina game. But Cal, even though we have them favored, like we said, Cal is probably the better team on paper. And just because it's a long road trip doesn't mean that they're necessarily gonna be tired or anything. So I think that could end up being a loss there. But a lot of the games where we don't have them favored in, it's basically a 50-50 shot. So this Virginia Tech has a lot of potential to maybe get to 8 wins. Maybe that's a little optimistic, but I think based off of how much they have to replace, especially in the wide receiver room, this is going to be a rebuild kind of year for this Hokie team. So I think 6-6 is where we'll see them end up again.
And like we mentioned earlier, 6-6 was where they were at last season before that eventual bowl game loss. Now, the win projection is actually pretty solid for Virginia Tech, seeing them get over 7 wins at 7.05 wins projected from those percentages on the last screen. We are, however, going to predict them to fall just short of that at 6-6. The Vegas over under is at 6.5, and they actually are favoring the under as well. So again, Vegas seems to be right around where we're at with about a 500 Hokies team, but probably still going to end up making a bowl game. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future content, and we'll see you in our next